Hello, my name is Peter West with West Networks, and today I want to talk cybersecurity. And to be able to do that, I wanted to get a cybersecurity expert on with me, and so I've got Al Wissinger from Fluency Security online, and we're going to just very freely chat cybersecurity. There's no script to this, and I thought it would be better so we can bounce ideas back and forth. But Al, thank you for coming and joining me today, and why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe give the folks on the other end just a chance to hear about it.
My pleasure. Thank you, Peter. I appreciate being on the show. So my background is I started off in really security, if you will, back in the mid-'70s, not to really age myself, but in the U.S. Navy, I was doing cryptographic communication equipment repair, right? Way back when. And after that time in the Navy, did 31 years at IBM doing a whole range of work that from anywhere from hardware repair, software repair, to management, to marketing, sales, and the whole gamut, right? We're enabling clients and partners, and then spent 7 years at one of our distributors, and that was Avnet Technology Solutions that was acquired by Tech Data. And then from there, I've spent the last 2 years with Fluency Security, and very uniquely and specially focused on the cyber health, if you will, of companies.
I like that. Can you tell me a little bit more about cyber health? Like, what is that?
That's a great question, Peter. And so one of the things I like to think of is, let me kind of reverse that back, answering a question with the question. And this is how I like our customers, and as we look at the whole client base, to think about this. And the question you have to answer is, if you got infected today with what is called ransomware, and it locked up all of your files, could you stay in business? That's the question. And what many companies have found is some of them absolutely cannot, right? The FBI talks about a number of 60% within 6 months might go out of business, especially within the SMB realm. That number might be a little high from my opinion, but I think certainly 20%. Right? You look back, I think it was a year or two ago, where some of the dental applications got hacked. Dentists couldn't do anything. They couldn't see patients or anything, let alone COVID's impact, right? So the ability for a business to operate, if they don't have their computers and their applications, is the big question. And that relates right back to cyber health, because as you look at your business, I depend on the data. I depend on the application. I depend on the simplest things like appointment books, right? And my emails and all of the other stuff I do. So cyber health, to me, is this ability to take a look at your environment and look at that as an attack surface, right? You got all these nefarious actors out there trying to figure out, how am I going to come in and attack, right? And so when I talk about cyber health, is A, are you prepared? And that requires investments. And B, are you monitoring it? And then C, do you have a plan in place that says I can react if something does happen? Right? So a perfect example would be, hey, listen, I get attacked, I got ransomware, but you know what? I've been pretty smart, like what you guys offer, Peter, with Veeam, right? The backup. That's so critical to a business. If you have your data backed up on a daily basis, you can at least recover up to that point that it's backed up. If you get ransomware, right? Rebuilding, a laptop or a desktop or a server and putting code back on it, that's not hard. It's just time consuming, but that's not hard. It's the data that's the heart of your business, right? That's so important. So cyber health to me really is, can you protect yourself? And if you can, and if you do get hit, and by the way, regardless of how prepared you are, as demonstrated by our U.S. government recently with the breach, right, with SolarWinds, and I apologize for mentioning the name, but it's out there in the public domain.
It's the name that we don't say.
That's right. But as we look at that breach, they had this massive investment in, I think, a product called Einstein that was supposed to be the panacea. And guess what? It didn't work. What works is having the tools, having the analysts looking at that data on a constant basis and watching out for things that can be problematic. So I know I took a lot of time to answer that question,
No,
Peter.
I love it. And because one of the things that I've experienced, especially as just growing up in my IT world, starting off in desktop, just regular old desktop support, and growing up into doing businesses and then enterprise grade SD-WAN, is that the level of security seems to be adapting all the time. And you start out with like a firewall, and then you have antivirus, and then you have firewalls, and then you start doing SIEMs, and you start doing. So I really want to understand how Fluency, because you still need antivirus, you still need firewalls, we still need monitoring. So the Fluency piece, tell me like how that magic pulls all that data together, or how you're able to see that ransomware before my firewall and my antivirus.
That's a great question. And early on in that statement, you talked about, having all of these various pieces of protection, right? And let's just take a point in case here with the antivirus, because that was a perfect example, by the way, with the network activity. But with your antivirus, a lot of the smaller companies are going to go out into your Costco's and Sam's Clubs and maybe on Amazon, and they're going to buy some off-the-shelf antivirus. Well, a lot of those depend on what's known as signatures. Well, guess what, folks? The bad actors out there know all of that stuff. They know how to get around all of that standard, home-based antivirus. And so what you really need is a corporate level product called endpoint detection and response. Now, that's a couple of grades higher than what the typical antivirus is, because you went from antivirus to endpoint protection, and then you went to endpoint detection and response. And what I mean by that is if an attack surface comes in and the EDR product, endpoint detection and response, can detect that what's called a 0-day. Hey, I have no intelligence on this whatsoever, but because I've got my artificial intelligence and my machine learning, I can figure out, hey, this is an attack surface, and I can stop it dead on the tracks. But when we look at the network, there's so much more diverse information coming in, right? From firewalls, from switches, from you name it, right? And then the other thing we capture is net flow data, which is so critical to help us understand is something happening. And so the notion is with Fluency, we want to take every element, every layer of protection you might have, and bring that log data or audit data, if you will, into our tool. And within our tool, the magic occurs with what's called user entity and behavior analytics. Now, that's a big buzzword, UEBA, but what it really means is, can I take and learn about things that are happening and be able to take anomalous scenarios and scenarios that aren't necessarily normal and figure out that they're abnormal? And can I alert you in time that there's a problem? And that's exactly what we did in this case. So we took all of the data from the environment to include the network, and we concluded, whoa, this isn't cool, right? And we were able to identify that and come back and let you know. So Fluency is an aggregator of all of your security content and your network content into one place, where we then go through and do a lot of analytics. That tool in the marketplace is called a SIEM, S-I-E-M, Security Information and Event Manager Tool. Now, there's a lot of SIEMs out there, but what you need to consider with that is, are they advanced? Are they cloud-based? Are they able to take in all of the disparate things that you have? Because that diversity of what you have, it depends on each client's needs, right? They may have something called Mimecast for email protection on one product. They may have Proofpoint, which is another product. They may have Gmail. They may have Office 365. There's so many different things to consider, but that's where we take that perspective of what's happening in left field, what's happening in right field, and bringing those together and saying, is this normal or abnormal? And if it's abnormal, bam, we trigger the alert and we let you know what's going on.
And I really like, or what we've noticed as we've been training our security guys to understand your software and use it, which is really easy. But you almost have like that risk threat analysis. So you're not looking at, like, as a security agent, we're not looking at every single event as if it's mission critical and having to research what that event means and why it's there. It's like we can see the high risk items on the threat dashboard, and research those items. And so how do those numbers come into play? Like, tell me about the threat analysis.
So that's a perfect one, right? And that comes into one of our patent areas with scoring, risk scoring. And so we take a look at what we call vectors. So your antivirus might be a vector, right? We're going to go out and look at some other security threat tools that are out there and look at a whole bunch of other things. So we may look at 14, 15, 16 different vectors. And based on what we're seeing from those vectors feeding into the tool, we're going to aggregate a score, right? So let's say VirusTotal, for example, says, Peter, this domain you went to, we think it's bad, right? And maybe this site here says, wait a minute, that IP address, I've never seen that before in your business. And so we start putting this intelligence together and we build this risk dashboard to the point where we can then present a score. And then we can show you the different vectors that triggered on that. And really, to your point of simplicity, our goal is to say, hey, I can come in and look at that risk dashboard. I can see what these scores are. And typically anything above a 3,000 or higher, you want to pay attention to. And obviously, the higher the score, you might want to peek at those first, right? But when you come into the tool, it's important to understand that that's just one piece of it, right? We've got 3 separate areas on the tool that we can look at, and one of them is a behavior summary, which is an output of those user and entity behavior analytic rules, right? The other is the risk dashboard, and then finally the reports. One of the things that most people aren't aware of is that, at least in small businesses, hey, I got my Microsoft email set up for my business. Well, Microsoft generates all kinds of codes and things, and there's a lot of things out there within the market that define what the most critical ones are. And what we do is we put a watch together, say, hey, let us know if any of these things trigger. Hey, did somebody log in from Alabama and 30 minutes later, that same person logged in from a different IP address in Oregon? Gosh, that doesn't make sense, right? Let me figure out what's happening. And typically, if that's the case, you've probably been hacked. Now, that takes me down a different path, Peter, and I apologize for being so talkative here, but there's just so much in this realm of cybersecurity that businesses don't understand. And most of your normal IT people don't deal with cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a real deep depth profession because it's so dynamic and ever changing. And some of the next things you're hearing about the actors out there is they're going to start using artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
A spoof that happened last year, and a spoof is, simulating something, is somebody took AI, they spoofed a CEO's voice, right? Called the accounts payable department. This is the CEO. You need to send a $300,000 payment to this person right away. And sure enough, that's what the company did. And so they lost that $300,000. And this is the kind of stuff that is so incredibly changing fast within the whole cybersecurity realm. And it takes really dedicated specialists to understand that and be able to then take tools like Fluency, right? And then interpret that data and come back and help do that layer of protection for the business.
That's incredible. So you actually brought up a whole bunch of really good points, and so I'm going to hit one of them. But you mentioned like Office 365, and we were talking about firewalls and antivirus. We talked about your, kind of like the idea that you're protecting or trying to protect these entities. But now everything's going to the cloud, and so you have AWS, and you have Office 365, and you have Azure, and one of the things that I've noticed, and just in the working with Fluency, is that we actually can see Office 365 activity. How are you doing that? Like, how are you guys ingesting that data, or what does that mean for a company looking at the cloud applications as a whole, and how far does that reach go?
Well, and ironically with Microsoft, right, is they have got incredible multiple tiers of service that you can buy, right? So for example, you can buy a business premium license, or you can buy an enterprise level 3 or an enterprise level 5, and each of those comes with all these different features and functions. But the one thing in common about all of that is they generate audit logs, right? Hey, Peter logged in today. What was his IP address? What time did he log in? And all of this other information that they can discern from that, and then they put that into the audit log. And then we take that data as fast as they can send it to us, because one of the differentiators about the Fluency tool, Peter, is that we were born in the cloud and for the cloud. So we figured out with our proprietary database how to stream data in, no matter how much you're trying to stuff down our throat, if you will, right? We can take live streaming data in at any rate that you want to pump it into us, because we have this built-in elasticity with our database that can grow on demand. You don't have to shut down and reprovision it. So as you look at that whole environment, it's important to consider a couple things. You've got density of data, right? And things like your endpoint detection and response. And one product that we like of many is called SentinelOne. You then have diversity of data. And so you look at your Microsoft feeds. Even within Microsoft, you've got feeds for DLP, which is called data loss protection. Hey, let me know when someone sends something like a credit card number through an email, right? Or any other sensitive client data. So you got all this diversity of data coming in. And again, Microsoft's probably a big one there that sends all these in. And we collect that, right? And then the distribution says, okay, now wait a minute. I'm in the COVID environment. I've got employees having to work from home. Wait a minute, I didn't buy them a machine to use at home. So now they got to use their own home machine in their home only environment, and they're whatever that behavior is, and now they're going to be interacting with my company data. Man, what am I going to do? So as we look at the Microsoft case, that's just like everybody else in that sense. So we collect all of that data and we bring it together. So one example is they have something called the Security Center, right, which is different layers of looking at data and presenting reports back to say, hey, Peter, look, these 5 people in your company are the highest ones getting phishing emails all the time. These 3 people might be the ones getting malware emails all the time, right? So what's important when you look at cybersecurity, the weakest link in cybersecurity continues to be the human, the you, the me, right? All of you out there. We are the weakest link. And sure enough, these people sending these nefarious emails will break through, and they get through to a percentage, and all it takes is one.
Yeah.
Right. Another client, right, that we mutually have here that we're supporting had a scenario where somebody got one of those emails, they clicked on it, filled out their credentials. Next thing you know, they got hacked. And then they used that hacked email to send that same, package of malware out to other folks. Next thing you know, the COO's filling out their credentials at the executive level for the company. And now you have somebody with what's called privileged access management being able to do whatever they want to do within the company. So we were able to help identify that and figure out what's going on and say, whoa, right? And it's all about taking that data, making sure, A, that you have the layers of protection, B, that you have the analyst reviewing that data, and that C, you have a plan of attack. So in that case, that client immediately shut down those email IDs, right? Forced them to have new passwords and multi-factor authentication and all that other kind of stuff. And then we're able to go through and track where it went and stop that and stop the virus dead in its tracks. So long answer again, my apologies, but there's just so much here. And you can really bring it down to three words: visibility, detection, and response. It's so critical that you take all of that density, diversity, and distribution consideration and then bring it into a process that really says, hey, let me see the data coming in, like from Microsoft. Let me correlate that to other data, like my network data coming in. Let me detect events. That's where the UEBA comes in, right? And then let me respond. And what's neat, really neat, Peter, about some of this technology that you and I collectively have put together for clients is the ability to do automated response. Automated response. If this, then that, go do this. A good example is if somebody in your business gets a worm on their network and a product like SentinelOne can't handle it, we get the alert anyway, and you can actually go back and say, disconnect that agent, i.e. that machine, from the network so nothing can spread until I can go resolve it. right? The other thing that we really like about that SentinelOne product is that if it gets infected with malware, if it gets infected, we can roll back on a sliding 24-hour window with SentinelOne the state just before the infection so you don't lose the data. Data is the gold mine for clients, right? And that's the piece that all these hackers really want to try to get and breach.
You're 100% right that the data is what we're trying to protect. And I mean, I remember my very first ever ransomware customer, and unfortunately, we didn't even know what ransomware was. The computers was just a little text pad on the thing that says, "Hey, we've encrypted your," and I was like, that's a joke. And so you're trying to fix this, and there is no fixing it. And so, unless you have good backups, you have good recovery policies, and luckily, just because of the way that we work with replication and backups, that customer only lost just a few days of work, and we were able to bring them back up to date. But unfortunately, companies don't have. I mean, sometimes losing 2 or 3 days is not enough. That's just not acceptable. And the more data becomes every day, the more working from home and working remote and having more ingest of data into companies and going online and going digital so that we can handle these workflows means that the data is the most critical aspect. And I think that the reason I wanted to have this conversation is to share with companies that we need to be proactively, and you said it, visibility detection. And I know the response is important, but a lot of times I think you think you have the response, but you're not detecting it in the right way. And so I found that this Fluency product, especially with SentinelOne, it's empowered my staff to immediately see and detect issues using that risk dashboard and the email alerts that you provide. And I wanted to be able to share this with everybody in a way that would be hopefully entertaining but helpful, and let people understand that there's options out there, because you can't stop the hackers. You're not going to stop them. Antivirus isn't going to stop them. Firewalls aren't going to stop them. You're going to be able to slow down existing threats. It's almost like a flu virus, right? Where you can take the flu shot to protect what is available by the signatures, but the next version that comes out, you have to wait until you detect it. And so, being able to respond more adequately utilizing a tool like this is important. And I just want to if you have maybe 2 more minutes, I know we've kind of gone over, and I'm going to respect your time, but 2 more minutes on an elevator pitch. What is Fluency, and who should have it? And I know the answer is everyone, but
yeah. Well, first of all, I think any business that depends on their data to keep their business active and going is critical. That's number one. Number two, that while Fluency is a next generation SIM tool that has really advanced analytic capability and all this other stuff, I think we really need to think about this in what I like to call the power of 3. So you take the capability of Fluency to ingress everything, analyze it, and alert. You take the capability of SentinelOne, for example, CrowdStrike or others, and bring that in. That gives you that enhanced endpoint, such a critical endpoint detection and response capability. And then the third leg of that power of 3 is the West Networks team, with the skills and the capabilities that your team brings to the table for clients, right? That power of 3 just brings everything together, and we enclose that customer in a glove of security that they can believe in and trust in, because we take the responsibilities, each of us, to make sure that A, we understand what's going on, B, we know your environment, and C, we can respond back to you in a timely fashion to help keep your business actively in business, right? You want to stay in business. And as a business person, you're not going to want to go specialize in cybersecurity and make your head spin. We can say acronyms all day long that would just, it doesn't make sense. So yes, Fluency, it is one of the most leading edge tools out there from a cloud-based perspective. But again, bringing it together with that power of 3, I think, Peter, that's what really makes a difference here for clients.
Thank you. And thank you for taking the time to join me, Al, and just sharing your knowledge and experience here. And I also want to say that I looked at a lot of security partners, and when I found you, but one of the things that I have, and I just want to compliment you on this as well, is the time and the passion that you have in teaching my staff and helping our customers. I mean, calling them up and giving them training and supporting their needs. And it is invaluable level of just attention, because this is a new world for a lot of companies, and understanding that it's not just about a firewall or just about antivirus. It's about creating that visibility and detection, like you mentioned, and being able to see what's going on. And so the knowledge and the training and the passion that your team brings to the table is absolutely exceptional. And it's been invaluable to my company.
Well, with a sincere, humble thank you. I appreciate that.